Hello, everyone. I'm the Honorable Ron Villanueva, joined with a distinguished gentleman from Virginia Beach, a longtime native, a fellow monarch, and someone who I could say is for the people, by the people. Right, Conrad?
Indeed, sir, yes.
Sure. So, Conrad, you want to introduce everyone to yourself for the viewing public that don't know you?
Well, Conrad Schesventer, Virginia Beach native since 1986, when born, went to ODU, as you so graciously mentioned. 2 degrees from there, but I mainly spent a lot of my time working as sort of like a youth coach, volunteer with intercollegiate athletics, volunteer with political campaigns, and I've worked at the Oceanfront for 15 years. So I have a pretty good handle to my limited understanding, I think, of this area.
So Conrad is running for the Rose Hall district seat. And as you know, in the city of Virginia Beach, we have some races out there in November. Conrad is not new to politics. He's, been a consultant and has done some lobbying, and he's been a previous candidate. And we in the citizens of Virginia Beach truly appreciate people stepping up to run. I always say good government comes when the people participate and listen, and that's one of your mantras, listening to the people. So can you tell us a little bit about your campaign platform?
My biggest planks with the campaign hinges around trying to solve flooding beyond just the aspect of the city. I want to use my voice as councilman to be someone who knocks on the doors of the assembly and our local federal reps to sort of rain down additional supplemental funding on flooding itself. I don't like the idea of trying to make it all rest on Virginia Beach, because it's going to take decades to do it if we did it that way, and too many people would see localized heavier taxes in order to fund it. So we need to get other and quicker forms of revenue in order to do that. Plus, I'm really big on the idea of increasing our transit options. I wouldn't rest so much on the idea of expanding light rail. I mean, it already sort of fell in the city anyway. I do like the idea of rapid bus transit like you see in a lot of European cities. And this would actually help the idea of regionalism if HRT is expanded into really, really good bus transit. I think that's just good for our economy in Virginia Beach and the entire 757. That's what I would really like to work on.
Connor, as part of your platform, you talked about prioritizing projects. As you know, COVID has decimated state and local budgets, and local budgets are looking at 30% cuts, maybe some freezes. Would you advocate continuation of the status quo with regards to budget prioritization, or would you look for new revenues, maybe some possible tax increases or fee increases? I mean, what's your strategy with regards to first prioritizing the budget, and two is how would you do it?
I would want to prioritize the things that we spend on if it's on education and solid infrastructure projects, more along the lines of road improvements, and also the idea of flooding projects. Like I went to council to talk about the pump station that is needed in Princess Anne Plaza. We're going to need a lot of those all over the city. I would really want to hold on to those types of projects to the very last breath that we could do. There are other parts of the budget I would think would be less important, and if we had to cut something, it would probably be something along the lines of the more superfluous type of development spending for businesses itself that would come out of the budget. I would more less likely want to try to defend against things that are more needed, like education and infrastructure on the spending side. I am sort of repulsed at the idea of increasing local taxes in order to make up for a revenue shortfall, because I would like to think that within about a year or two anyway, would be pretty much back up and humming. And then suddenly we, like most governments, would not be so willing to then reverse course and do a tax cut. So I would just try to pump the brakes on tax and fee hikes and try to hold on to the last thing, the important city funding such as infrastructure projects and education.
So with regards to infrastructure projects, Conrad, you prioritize, and one of your priorities is flooding mitigation. Having been in the General Assembly and been one of the champions with regards to coastal flooding, we know the money's hard to come by. So what would be a solution for the city of Virginia Beach with regards to attacking a lot of its backlog on flooding projects?
I would have to mention Brent St. Plaza again because I'm nearby and attend a couple of their civic leagues prior to COVID. They were really interested in bringing in city workers who are talking about future flooding projects over the next 10 to 15 years. They said that they already had a lot of the plans in mind. They are hamstrung not so much just by Virginia Beach dollars, but also red tape, which is mainly something that would be hamstrung by state of Virginia and from DC. So if we can sort of release the things that are stopping them from being able to start their projects, this is where I would hypothetically come to someone like yourself in the General Assembly as a councilman to try to reduce that. That is what I think would actually be very good in helping to speed the process up, because they already have the projects, they just need the funding and the reduction of the red tape. That's why I would want to go to someone like yourself in order to help that out, and all the other 99 Assembly members and the senators.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the shout out. I'm retired, so I'm like you. I'm for the community, by the community. How would you say the city of Virginia Beach has responded to the COVID crisis? They've done some good things. They can improve in some areas. Where do you think we can improve as a city with regards to protecting our businesses and balancing the welfare of our citizens?
I do recall a couple things that stand out, like their willingness to be a little bit more flexible on the payment of some of their taxes and holding back on some of the late fees for doing that, though that was more closer to June and July. And if I recall, I do like the idea of extending that if needed, especially with the demand side of COVID wrecking a lot of our service-based economy. We're going to need to bring the revenue back before we can start paying those taxes. So I do like that idea. I also like the fact that a lot of the outdoor eating venues were sort of opened up and loosened up. I don't think the city was the one who allowed for the alcohol to go. I think that was state of Virginia. But the idea of trying to help out more and more business to maneuver around the hamstrung parts of COVID regulations is something that we needed. Is a limited access to what the city of Virginia Beach could do, but at least they tried. And I will give them their due for that. And we're still in this to try to keep fighting, so we're going to keep looking for new ways to do that.
Conrad, you mentioned earlier that you are in the service industry down in Virginia Beach, and the city of Virginia Beach relies heavily on its service and hospitality industry. Mm-hmm. How would you say, do you see that perception that Virginia Beach is more than just the oceanfront? And then how do you talk to citizens with regards to taking care of the other districts versus the oceanfront?
I would, if I was explaining this to someone who was, say, from out of town, what our biggest factors of the economy is, of course, I would point out tourism is number one, but we also are heavily in the military and heavily in agriculture. So it's sort of like three prongs of our economy. On the agriculture part, we're definitely trying to hold up by making sure we don't have too much development that is non-agriculture based south of the Green Line. Though some things sort of go against that, like the Asheville Park, and that I think a couple of weeks back that they approved that the Wolf Brothers project down in the Pungo area. That stuff I really want to do too much, so much as trying to preserve that part of agriculture. The military, definitely want to make sure we don't run into another situation like back around 2004-ish when BRAC was thinking about closing down Oceana. So make sure you hold on to that. Tourism, we're having stuff like the surf park coming to the Dome site, so we're definitely starting to bring that back up, and we need to make sure we hold on tight to ideas like something in the water. I just don't want it to seem like the entire part of new development in the city of Virginia Beach is more singularly focused on expanding tourism. There are other parts of the city I think that really could use some commerce too. Centerville, Burton Station, maybe the Newtown area, the western parts of Virginia Beach. They could also use a little bit of an interjection of new commerce too. So I wouldn't want to look to expanding that aspect of the city. Perhaps we can bring in a lot of tech jobs for that because the internet cables are coming from Europe and Africa to here in Virginia Beach. So we're going to bring in some data centers and hopefully more tech jobs will come into that. Maybe one day that could be a fourth pillar is big tech. So that's something I would look toward down the line.
Well, you mentioned a lot of our strategic growth areas, and prior to COVID, the city of Virginia Beach focused on some growth initiatives. One you talked about was big tech with regards to the new overseas cable lines that are coming over to city of Virginia Beach. It's going to stand up a new industry. The city of Virginia Beach was also focused on bio and health sciences. We've always been a defense industry, service related economy, hospitality. You talked about agriculture. Talk a little bit about your big tech push on your platform and bringing jobs here to the city of Virginia Beach.
I don't want to model too much off of Northern Virginia because that has a lot of the aspect of a lot of sprawl, but a lot of tech seems to go to that part of the city, not the city, but the state. And they could sort of bisect the need to go to that area to try to be around DC if they want to go to the quicker aspect of the internet with the cables. You mentioned like bio. If I remember that was to be built around the Nemo area. I wonder if a lot of the tech would try to be around that area, Virginia Beach and the Nemo Parkway area. I don't think it should only be that way, but those have been the plans that I've seen so far was that down the data center and then the green bio thing. I would want to expand a lot of those type of opportunities, but beyond just that area of the city, if that makes sense. Probably not so much the Oceanfront, let that be the tourists and not around Oceana because that's the military, but see if we can branch out again to that western part as long as that doesn't take away some of that speed with the internet that we have.
Conrad, you've been a proponent with regards to citizen representation on city council. More people that reflect Virginia Beach diversity. With regards to ward systems here in Virginia Beach, there is a court case that's going on. You're supportive of a new ward system here in Virginia Beach, and why?
I would still keep the idea of a mix, but the districts, I would want them to be literally direct wardish type of districts. So I want to run for Rose Hall. So I want only the citizens of Rose Hall to vote for Rose Hall people, but it doesn't mean I want to get rid entirely of other at-large seats. Councilman Rouse, Moss, Rosemary Wilson, those are the types of seats that could remain as at-large in my vision with it. But Centerville, Princess Anne, Bayside, Lynn, Haven, Rose Hall, Beach, I want that to be more direct. So it feels like each of those areas have a literal voice that seems to be specific to that area. That way, someone in my area voting for Rose Hall isn't diluted by like the other 400,000 or so people in the city who might have slightly different interests, and it sort of evens out. It doesn't have that specialized interest. It literally strengthens, say, hypothetical Bayside person's vote if they could directly vote for a Bayside rep as opposed to the entire city. So I just like the idea of direct representation to strengthen the power of our vote. I think that'll also help out.
So you're looking at a hybrid system, keep the 4 at-large seats, mm-hmm. and directly elect the members in their member districts.
Yes, if I recall, I think some describe the city as hybrid already, but we still at-large elect the districts. So just take away the at-large of the districts, but keep the at-large seats, make it a more literal hybrid.
So Conrad, as you know, I served on city council for a long time. I was an at-large district member. I preceded John Moss and Aaron and Rosemary. With regards to the at-large districts, man, running citywide is an incredible task. We're seeing in the November elections, I was one of the May council members. You're seeing a lot of more partisanship with regards to these elections. I noticed that you're endorsed by the Democratic Party. How does that play a role in your candidacy, and how does, say, someone like a Republican or an independent, look at you as a candidate when you have, backings and different coalitions that are supporting you? How does that play a role?
I would like to think it still somewhat evens out. And I mean this because this is the first year that the Republicans have also decided to bring their own level of partisanship to the race. And I don't want to just think of partisan too negatively. I say that, yes, because I'm a member of the Virginia Beach Democrats. My opponent is a member of the Republicans. But we actually could get probably higher turnout overall if we could get a lot of people who sort of know where the candidates are overall, because they see who they're supported by. And that should increase the local election turnout, or at least that's how I'm imagining it right now, because people take back their knowledge of where people stand. I think a lot more people will come out, and that should help the sample size of representation in the city, which should be a good thing. If there are more Republicans that vote for this race, they will choose who they would like to. If there are more Democrats, they will choose who they would like to. If the entire city was all independents, of course, we wouldn't have the parties. I think it could be a good thing.
Do you think, and I was part of the council that decided, and I think it was a mistake, going from May elections to November elections, because local issues are important. That's why you're running, and you're wanting to make an impact. But a lot of voters tend not to pay attention to these local issues. It's being drowned out by the national scene. Would you be in favor of moving the local elections back to a May timeframe versus a November timeframe?
If the goal is to try to get a focus on local, I'm not against the idea of it being in May, but the trick is to whether or not I would be for it. And if, for instance, when we put light rail on the ballot in 2016, it was held in November because we needed to make sure we got as much of the city who was interested in voting for it as possible. So there is also the plus of having city races in November, because more eyes are going to be on the time there too, so more people are going to vote. If we can find a way to make sure that people can increase their voting in May as well, then it's not bad to have it in May. We just need to make sure that enough people would be interested. But you would be correct. If it is moved back to May, then the people who do show up are the ones who are going to be more focused anyway. So it sort of like strengthens the look for local anyway. Each side has its own things. I kind of like it now in November. Of course, I guess that's because I'm in my campaign mode as it is. If you step back, they probably both have good pluses.
So you've been on the trail. What are the citizens telling you? What are important to them right now? What are some of the issues?
Well, this particular year, it's been a lot of social justice issues, but also it's Virginia Beach, so flooding never went away. Even we had less people out and about because of COVID and it hurting the businesses. So COVID, of course, is number one, but flooding was always 1A or 1B. And COVID was the sudden variable. It was going to be flooding if COVID never happened anyway. So flooding is always the number one. I interject the idea of transit, and I'll bring that up every time I can. I think a lot of people like that too, because I think that would help them. But flooding and COVID are the main things that I think people themselves seem to be talking about.
Do you think the transit model will change because of COVID? I mean, you're seeing ridership down. You're not seeing density with regards to transit anymore. Uber and Lyft, a lot of their ridership is down. Do you still see that as a priority?
I see it as a priority because I don't want to think that COVID is a version of normal. If it is normal, then that is going to be problems that exist beyond just the idea of transit. If we rebound, regardless of whether or not Democrats, Republicans win, if we just have a normalcy to our economy, then the problem was a lack of transit. So I don't want to forget it, if that makes sense, just because COVID is happening, because it was a, sort of a systemic thing that we needed to try to improve anyway. So as you can see, I'm probably holding one thing in my hand. Metaphorically, we should be capable as a city, as a region, of tackling multiple things at once. And we could tackle COVID and transit and flooding if we choose to.
How do you think our region can improve with regards to strengthening its regional ties? And you as a council member being on council, how can the city of Virginia Beach improve regionalism?
They need to drop the idea of NIMBY, not in my backyard. It seems to be sort of like a nativist feel. And this is my eyes looking at everyone sort of talk about it. They don't want to work with Norfolk. They don't want to work with Chesapeake. They certainly wouldn't want to work, I guess, with people in Hampton and Newport News because they're across the water. I think that hurts the ability of the entire 757 in order to grow because it's so many self-interested cities. And it's good to have interest for yourself, but it could hurt if you're not getting help from the other side. And of course, we fall back to transit on this because it is HRT, Hampton Roads Transit. It's already regional. So if we're willing to try to think more regionally and not think in terms of like it's a negative, all it does is create a positive. And this isn't something that needs to be special to me, a Democrat or a Republican, because there are going to be Republicans and Democrats who want to help each other anyway, as long as we just stop that facade.
For this segment, let's do a little grab bag. I'm going to name some topics and, just shoot out, what you think about them. Rudy Loop.
Rudy Loop, for some reason, I'm thinking back to a scrapbook that I had in the 90s when I was in third grade. They had us have pictures at Virginia Beach, and the thing I had on the front was Rudy Loop when it had that little bungee jump thing. And they also had that restaurant that was on the side. Now that restaurant's no longer there. That bungee jump thing's there. It's more surfing and parking. I would sort of say keep it that way because with falling back to COVID again, we have a certain level of infrastructure that's already pretty good, hotels and businesses and restaurants wise. It doesn't need to flood all the way down to Rudy and have everything from 1st Street down to 43rd Street completely covered in commerce. That could be something that we could sort of preserve, and it would have a historical aspect to it. Plus, we could, if we're going to be developing, we can keep it to the areas that might have recently failed businesses and just replace them with new businesses. You don't need to build another hotel or 2 or 3 at Rudy Loop. I'd preserve Rudy Loop as it is.
When I was on council, I was one of the champions of small women and minority business contracting here in the city. The city has aspirational goals. We fell way short on those goals, but they've done a lot to implement diversity in job opportunities and contracting. I think what's fallen short is probably like the federal government developing quotas with regards to SWAMs. Would you be for that, and would you push for it?
Very much so. I don't want to name drop for the sake of name dropping, but I will admit that Sabrina Wooten is very instrumental in bringing forth not just helping out with the disparity studies results, but having transparency where she shows it to the people. I helped her at one of her things at Region earlier in the year, and I think that is needed throughout more of the city than just say the Centerville area. We need to know what is going on with such disparity, and that could be all of the council people, myself included if I win. If I do not, my opponent, Mr. Bellucci, if he wins, this is a topic he should be able to speak on with some of his town halls, Princess Anne District. This is a citywide thing that we should be attacking positively. I think we already started the ball rolling, and that's a good thing, but we need to address it collectively. That way we can actually increase it past, I think, the 12% number that they wanted to do with a lot of the contracts. As long as they're all on the same page and that is something they all agree to try to do, I think we can do it, as long as we're very open about the progress. That's the vision on that one.
Earlier, you mentioned the surf park, Pharrell's, signature initiative on the Dome site. I know the city of Virginia Beach has always pursued a lot of these large projects. Do you think that's a strong strategy with regards to pursuing such projects when you literally have hundreds of businesses that could pivot and help improve the economy and bring jobs, such as what you said earlier, big tech, bio, defense?
Sort of picking out a thread I mentioned earlier, it would seem like to the viewer of the past 2 to 3 years that when you throw in the surf park, that sportsplex on 17th Street, the fact that they tried to go for an arena and a new convention center hotel, that stuff you see in the paper of new flashy development always seemed to be at the oceanfront. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all of it would be bad. The Dome site project and the surf park could very well be good. COVID wrecked a lot of plans, but again, don't think that is normal. Think of what we were sort of projecting. If with the theater aspect of it, some of the affordable living, I think that they were trying to throw into there too, and they had very sound flooding infrastructure that they were going to build into that too. And it seemed like that could be more than just on paper a good idea. It wasn't mentioned, but the sportsplex would be, sports center would be a little bit down the street from that. And they already booked the indoor NCAA championships. So it seems like that one is already a success and it only recently opened. It could work as long as we're able to bring in enough of the demand for that. I worked at Virginia Beach Oceanfront since 2005. I know what it is like in October and November and December and January. It sort of falls off the wayside. But with something like the surf park, because it had some internal venues where people like to go inside, that could be a very good thing. And it would then, in theory, also help out the neighboring businesses too.
So that it would support the local economy better, if we had a venue like that. To help soften the blow during the shoulder season you're talking about. You talked a little bit, I think the citizens can appreciate your stance on affordable housing. So how do you reconcile where City of Virginia Beach is pretty much developed, a lot of density north of the Green Line, and there's tremendous push towards development and growth past the Green Line in the agricultural areas. So, when you talk about affordable housing, these developers will tell you, they've got to have the land to build in order to have, cheaper workforce housing. So how do you reconcile your stance with regards to no growth in the Green Line and south in the agriculture area and promoting affordable housing?
I would want to reconcile it through aiming it in certain directions. For instance, my biggest problem that I want to fix is flooding. That is exacerbated by taking down a lot of our trees. I've traveled a lot of Indian River Road the past year or two and noticed some new housing that has sprung up around the Stumpy Lake area that took down a lot of trees in order to do that. The plus was housing. The negative was the reduction of vegetation that helped soak up the water. Also, that Springs Crossing area took down a lot of farmland in order to put the plus of housing, but they did it in different ways. One was like a big neighborhood of individual houses, and one were apartments. I would like the more dense apartment types compared to the housing, because the housing would take up more land And in theory, if you do more of the apartments, you would reduce the amount of trees you would need to cut down. So I would want to aim the goal of affordable housing in such a way that it is more beneficial to the environment and flooding, and make sure we sort of actually bring back more trees. I would not say want to do an asphalt park type of development, especially because it also had really bad flooding infrastructure that they built in itself, which caused the flooding itself. I would want a type of development like that, of course, A, to be above the green line, but also build it correctly. So again, it's sort of jumbled a bit, but there are things that we need to do, like achieve housing, but you got to do it the right way. And you also don't need to make sure you hurt your overall flooding problems at the same time. This is all something that we could try to do if we're just aiming it in the right direction, if that makes sense.
Conrad, how do citizens get a hold of you if they want to find out more about your candidacy?
I'm very active on social media, but not on Twitter, on Facebook. So Conrad Schesventer for Virginia Beach, that's where I'm day to day talking about stuff. Friendsforconrad.com is my actual website. You guys can have my number if you'd like, 757-719-2113. And if you just want to drop me an email, that would be conrad564@aol.com. And if you want to watch me talk politics and business, just generally, roughly every Tuesday, I'm part of a show called The Beach Brothers Show, where we bring in various business and political minds alike to just talk shop for about 45 minutes. So follow The Beach Brothers Show on Facebook as well, and catch up on business and politics in the area.
Sounds like you're a great civic leader and wanting to step up and represent our city. Conrad, how do you, where do you see Virginia Beach headed?
Very, very positively. I think in the next few years, we're probably actually going to reverse our trend of either like no growth in terms of the population to slightly less growth. Because I do remember seeing it once where it was about 450,000. Now it's close to like 430. I think if we really are good in terms of how we do the housing and secure the flooding, transit, of course, these are my campaign plans, but I see if they're actually done, this could be like sort of a glistening, I don't want to use the phrase city on a hill because that was Reagan's, but we could be very bright in terms of people who would want to flock to this area. And I'll mention this. I went to Salem High School, graduated in 2005. I mentioned that so many of my friends went off to college but did not return to this area. I think that is also a trend that gets stopped. More people who are like myself stay behind if we just make it better.
Well, we live in the greatest city in the United States. One last question. A lot of you taken a great stance with regards to police reform as part of your platform. City of Virginia Beach is one of the safest. Obviously, we got a ways to go with regards to racial harmony. What are some of the initiatives that you think can strengthen the police and help protect the community as well?
It's controversial, but I don't want to necessarily run away from it because I like the idea of police reform, but also keeping a very strong police force. For instance, I would actually like police officers to have higher pay, but I wouldn't necessarily want them to say, and this is a number I've only cited since about August when I found it out, about 69,400 or so traffic stops happen in Virginia Beach a year. I think that's not necessarily a number that needs to be that high. We can maintain very safe communities, roadways, monitored by our police, but not necessarily so over-policed. And maybe I won't use the term like defund the police because that has a negative connotation, but if we just do some simple things like strengthen the Citizens Review Board and strengthen just the concept of accountability for any time the possible police could do something wrong, that's really anyone is fighting for anyway. It's just a level of justice and accountability and just get back to feel like we're all in this in a positive light. Every single part of our very diverse community could look at it positively that way.
Conrad, we appreciate your efforts to be elected, be our leader, but more importantly, we appreciate your participation in the democratic process. I look forward to returning the favor and being an honorary beach brother. You and I are fellow monarchs. Please let me know, or the Coastal Chamber, if we could do anything to help assist in some of the initiatives that you've been promoting.
Thank you.
Again, Conrad, we thank you for being part of our civic engagement platform. Go out there and vote in November. Thanks, Conrad.
Thank you guys so much.
Take care. God bless.
You too.